Take that ghetto crown off your head, sweetheart. This is a professional establishment.
The words cut through the sterile air of Conference Room B like a blade through silk. Blake Miller's voice carried the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced consequences for his actions. His kitchen shears glinted under the fluorescent lights as he stepped behind Maya Washington's chair, the metal cold against her neck. 3 different angles. 4 pieces of evidence. 0 way out. The timestamp on the security camera read 11:47 a.m. March 15th. The hidden body camera app on Maya's phone had been recording for exactly 43 minutes. The corporate surveillance system captured everything from the northeast corner, and Jessica Hayes, sitting 2 seats away, had her phone positioned perfectly to document what she thought would be Maya's humiliation. None of them knew they were creating the evidence that would destroy them all. Maya Washington had walked into Pinnacle Restaurant Group's downtown Chicago headquarters that Tuesday morning, believing she was attending a routine supervisory meeting. The 28-year-old shift supervisor had been with the company for exactly 6 weeks, long enough to notice the patterns, but not long enough to understand the full scope of what she'd uncovered. Her protective braids hung past her shoulders, each strand woven with the precision her grandmother had taught her 15 years ago. They weren't just hair. They were heritage, identity, strength made visible. Maya had worn them to every job interview, every promotion meeting, every moment when she needed to remember who she was beneath the corporate expectations. The Pinnacle building rose 32 floors above Michigan Avenue, its glass facade reflecting the March clouds that promised snow before evening. Maya's heels clicked against the marble lobby as she made her way to the express elevator, her leather portfolio containing the financial discrepancies she'd discovered during last week's payroll audit. Something was wrong with the numbers. Overtime hours vanishing from timesheets. Tip distributions that didn't match reported sales. Minor adjustments that, when multiplied across dozens of employees and multiple locations, represented thousands of dollars every month. Maya had spent her weekend cross-referencing schedules with bank deposits, building a spreadsheet that revealed a pattern too deliberate to be accidental. The elevator climbed silently toward the 26th floor, where regional management conducted their monthly reviews. Maya checked her phone. 11 o'clock exactly. The meeting notification had been brief. Mandatory attendance, new grooming standards, all department supervisors. She'd found the timing suspicious. Grooming standards weren't typically discussed in March, and the mandatory language felt unnecessarily aggressive. But Maya had learned to pick her battles carefully. 6 weeks wasn't long enough to establish allies, and her questions about the payroll irregularities had already earned her several uncomfortable conversations with middle management. The conference room door stood open when Maya arrived. Blake Miller leaned against the windows, his 32-year-old frame filling out his chef's jacket with the kind of confidence that came from 8 years of kitchen authority. His sandy hair was perfectly styled, his smile sharp enough to fillet fish. Beside him, Derek Stone scrolled through his tablet, the assistant manager's nervous energy manifesting in the constant tapping of his fingers against the device's screen. Sarah Collins occupied the chair closest to the head of the table, her floor supervisor badge catching the light from the windows. At 31, she'd cultivated an image of corporate professionalism that masked the calculating intelligence in her pale blue eyes. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it seemed to stretch her features into permanent disapproval. Jessica Hayes sat 3 seats down, her phone positioned casually on the table beside her notepad. The 26-year-old senior server had climbed the company hierarchy through a combination of charm and strategic information gathering. Her auburn hair fell in waves that looked effortless but required an hour of styling each morning. Maya. Blake's voice carried false warmth. Perfect timing. We were just discussing the new image standards that corporate wants to implement across all locations. Maya took her seat, placing her portfolio on the table. I wasn't aware image standards were changing. Nothing came through official channels. That's because these are preliminary discussions. Derek looked up from his tablet, his brown eyes avoiding direct contact. Regional Director Carter wants to ensure we're all aligned before making any formal announcements. The mention of David Carter made Maya's spine straighten slightly. She'd met the regional director only once during her initial interview process. 45 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of commanding presence that filled rooms and silenced opposition. Carter had built his reputation on efficiency and profit margins, turning struggling locations into top performers through what he called cultural optimization. What kind of standards are we discussing? Maya kept her voice level, professional. Sarah's smile was paper-thin. Nothing dramatic, just ensuring our staff presents a consistent professional appearance that aligns with Pinnacle's brand values. Hair, specifically. Blake moved away from the windows, his footsteps deliberate as he circled the table. Corporate feels that certain ethnic styles might not project the upscale image our clientele expects. The words hung in the air like smoke from a grease fire. Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with recognizing a trap being set. She'd navigated these conversations before, in other jobs, other cities. The language was always careful, legally defensible, wrapped in corporate speak that made discrimination sound like business strategy. I'm not sure I understand. Maya's voice remained steady. Are you suggesting that natural black hairstyles don't meet professional standards? Not at all. Jessica finally spoke, her tone suggesting helpful clarification rather than confrontation. It's about consistency, making sure everyone looks polished. Maya reached into her portfolio and withdrew her phone, ostensibly to check the time. Her thumb found the recording app she'd installed 2 weeks ago, when the questions about payroll had started generating uncomfortable attention. The screen showed the red dot that indicated active recording. I think there might be some confusion about what constitutes professional appearance, Maya said, settling the phone on the table beside her notepad. My hairstyle has never been mentioned in any performance review or client feedback. Blake's hand moved to the pocket of his jacket, where the outline of kitchen shears was visible through the fabric. That's because we're being proactive, rather than reactive. Prevention is better than dealing with complaints later. What complaints? Maya's question was sharp enough to cut through the diplomatic language. Derek shifted in his seat, his tablet forgotten. It's not about specific complaints. It's about maintaining standards that reflect our commitment to excellence. Whose excellence? Maya leaned forward slightly. Because my department has exceeded service targets for 5 consecutive weeks. Our customer satisfaction scores are the highest in the region. Our staff retention is up 12% since I started. Sarah's fingers drummed against the table surface. Performance metrics are only part of the equation, Maya. Image matters just as much as efficiency. And you're telling me that my image is the problem? The silence that followed was filled with the building's ambient noise, ventilation systems humming, distant traffic from Michigan Avenue, the muffled conversations from other conference rooms. Maya could feel the trap closing around her, could see the coordination in their glances, the way Blake's hand remained near his pocket. Nobody's calling you a problem, Blake said finally. We're offering a solution. He pulled the kitchen shears from his pocket with practiced ease, the blades sliding apart with a soft metallic whisper. Sometimes the best way to address a situation is direct action. Maya's body went still, but her mind accelerated. The recording app was capturing everything. The security camera in the corner was undoubtedly documenting the scene. Jessica's phone was positioned to record from another angle. They were creating evidence of their own crime, confident that corporate protection would shield them from consequences. "You're not seriously suggesting," Maya began. "I'm not suggesting anything." Blake moved behind her chair, his presence looming. "I'm implementing policy." Before we see exactly how Maya responds to this unprecedented attack on her dignity and identity, I want you to understand something important. If you believe that workplace harassment should never be tolerated, that evidence matters more than position, and that justice can win against corporate power, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to see how this story unfolds, because Maya's journey is about to become a masterclass in strategic resistance. And if this message resonates with your own experiences fighting workplace discrimination, tap the thanks button to support our mission of exposing these systems. Now, I'm genuinely curious. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments below, because Maya's story is about to go international, and I want to know how far this message of workplace justice reaches. The first cut took 3 inches from the left side of her head. The sound was unnaturally loud in the quiet room, the decisive snap of metal through hair, followed by the soft whisper of braids falling to the conference table. Maya's body remained perfectly still, her hands flat against the smooth surface, her breathing controlled and deliberate. "There," Blake's voice carried satisfaction. "Much more professional." Derek's tablet captured the moment from his position across the table, the device angled to document what they believed was Maya's submission. Sarah smiled with the cold satisfaction of someone witnessing a necessary correction. Jessica's phone continued recording, her expression mixing fascination with something that might have been discomfort. Maya watched the severed braids on the table, each strand representing hours of careful work, generations of cultural tradition, the visible manifestation of her identity. The urge to react violently pulsed through her muscles, but she forced herself to remain motionless. 20 years of navigating hostile environments had taught her that the first person to lose control would be blamed for everything that followed. Instead, she gathered the cut hair with careful precision, placing each braid in a neat pile beside her portfolio. Her movements were deliberate, ceremonial almost, as if she were collecting evidence for a crime scene investigation. "Are you documenting this?" Maya's voice was quieter than before, but it carried a weight that made Derek shift nervously in his seat. "Documenting what?" Blake returned to his position by the windows, the shears still in his hand. "A routine grooming adjustment?" Maya looked directly at the security camera in the corner, then at Jessica's phone, finally at Derek's tablet. 3 different angles, multiple recording devices, time-stamp documentation. She turned to face Blake, her eyes steady and unflinching. "You've just created the most comprehensive evidence package of workplace discrimination I've ever seen." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Sarah's smile faltered slightly. Derek's tablet trembled in his hands. Jessica's phone continued recording, but her expression had shifted from entertainment to something approaching concern. "That's a serious accusation," Blake said, but his voice lacked its previous confidence. "It's not an accusation." Maya stood slowly, gathering her portfolio and her phone. "It's a statement of fact. You used scissors to forcibly alter my appearance while claiming it was company policy. You recorded the act to document my compliance. You did this in front of multiple witnesses, in a corporate setting, while I was performing my duties as a supervisor. She moved toward the door, her heels clicking against the floor with measured precision. The question isn't whether this constitutes discrimination. The question is whether you understand the legal framework that governs hostile work environments. Blake stepped away from the windows, his chef's jacket rustling. "You're overreacting. This was a simple grooming adjustment." Maya paused at the threshold, her hand on the door handle. "Simple grooming adjustments don't require kitchen shears, Blake. They don't require documentation, and they certainly don't require ambush meetings disguised as policy discussions." She opened the door and stepped into the hallway, leaving the four of them staring at the empty chair where she'd been sitting. The cut braids remained on the conference table like evidence at a crime scene. Maya's office was a 12 by 10 space on the 24th floor, with a window that overlooked the delivery bays behind the building. She'd chosen it specifically for the view it provided of the restaurant's operational heart. The constant flow of trucks, the patterns of employee arrivals and departures, the rhythm of a business that generated millions in revenue every quarter. She closed the door and activated the privacy lock, then pulled out her phone to stop the recording app. 47 minutes of audio, including 12 minutes of the conference room meeting. She saved the file with a timestamp and began uploading it to 3 different cloud storage accounts. Her hands shook slightly as she worked, the adrenaline from the confrontation finally expressing itself in physical symptoms. Maya forced herself to breathe steadily, to focus on the technical tasks that would preserve the evidence. Emotional processing could wait. Documentation was more urgent. The portfolio on her desk contained the payroll irregularities she'd discovered, but now she understood they were part of a larger pattern. The grooming standards meeting hadn't been about her hair. It had been about her questions, her investigation, her refusal to ignore the financial discrepancies that pointed toward systematic wage theft. Maya opened her laptop and began transcribing the conversation while it was still fresh in her memory. Every word, every gesture, every moment of coordination between Blake, Derek, Sarah, and Jessica. The transcript would supplement the audio recording, providing context and detail that might not be clear from the sound alone. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Conference room B, 10 minutes, come alone." Maya stared at the screen, recognizing the implied threat. They wanted to continue the conversation away from security cameras, away from documentation. It was exactly the kind of mistake that would strengthen her case. She replied, "All future conversations will be conducted through official channels with HR present." The response came immediately. This wasn't a request. Maya screenshot the exchange and added it to her evidence file. Then she opened her email and began composing a message to Pinnacle's corporate HR department, describing the morning's events in careful, professional language. She attached the audio recording, the photographs of her severed hair, and the threatening text messages. As she worked, Maya became aware of voices in the hallway outside her office. Hushed conversations, the sound of footsteps pausing near her door, the electronic beep of someone trying to access the lock. They were regrouping, planning their next move. Her computer chimed with an incoming email from David Carter, the regional director. The subject line read, "Immediate meeting required." The message was brief. "My office, 5 p.m. today. Mandatory attendance." Maya forwarded the email to her personal account and began researching employment attorneys in Chicago. She'd learned long ago that corporate HR departments existed to protect the company, not the employees. If this escalated beyond internal resolution, she would need independent legal representation. Her search led her to Patricia Wells, a labor attorney who specialized in workplace discrimination cases. The firm's website showcased several high-profile settlements, including a recent victory against a restaurant chain accused of systematically targeting minority employees for termination. Maya drafted an email to Wells's office, outlining the basics of her situation and requesting a consultation. She attached the key evidence files and marked the message as urgent. Then she printed copies of everything and placed them in a sealed envelope addressed to her apartment. If they wanted to play hardball, Maya would demonstrate exactly how expensive that game could become. The remainder of the afternoon passed in suspicious quiet. Maya's usual responsibilities, reviewing shift schedules, approving vendor payments, conducting performance evaluations, continued as if nothing had happened. But the atmosphere in the building had changed. Conversations stopped when she passed in the hallways. Colleagues avoided eye contact. The normal rhythm of workplace interaction had been replaced by careful choreography designed to minimize contact. At 4:30, Maya gathered her files and made her way to the 30th floor, where David Carter maintained his regional office. The elevator ride felt longer than usual, each floor marking her ascent into increasingly rarefied corporate air. By the time she reached Carter's reception area, the building's ambient noise had faded into the kind of silence that money could buy. Carter's secretary, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and surgical precision in her manner, gestured toward the closed office door. "He's waiting for you." Maya knocked twice and entered without waiting for permission. David Carter stood behind his desk, his silver hair catching the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. His charcoal suit was tailored to perfection, his tie knotted with mathematical precision. At 45, he'd cultivated an image of corporate authority that had carried him through 2 decades of restaurant management. "Maya," his voice was warm, almost paternal. "Please, sit down." The office was designed to intimidate. Leather furniture that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Artwork that suggested cultured sophistication. A wall of awards and photographs documenting Carter's rise through the corporate hierarchy. Maya chose the chair directly facing his desk, maintaining eye contact as she settled into the leather. "I understand there was some confusion during this morning's meeting," Carter began, his tone suggesting reasonable discussion rather than disciplinary action. "There was no confusion." Maya's voice was steady. "There was a deliberate assault on my person, documented by multiple recording devices, witnessed by 4 employees, and justified through fabricated company policy." Carter's expression didn't change, but Maya noticed the slight tightening around his eyes. "That's a very serious allegation. Before we proceed, I want to ensure we're operating with complete transparency." He opened his desk drawer and withdrew a thick manila folder. "I've been reviewing your employment file, Maya. 6 weeks with the company. Excellent performance reviews. No disciplinary actions. A model employee by any reasonable measure." Maya waited for the contradiction she knew was coming. "Which makes this morning's incident so troubling." Carter opened the folder and withdrew several photographs. "These were taken by security personnel during your shift last Tuesday." The images showed Maya in the restaurant's dining room, but the context had been carefully manipulated. A conversation with a colleague appeared confrontational. A gesture of emphasis looked aggressive. A moment of laughter seemed inappropriate for the professional setting. "I see you talking to employees during work hours about topics unrelated to their duties," Carter continued. "I see you accessing financial records outside your authorized responsibilities. I see behavior patterns that suggest you might not be the team player we thought we hired." Maya studied the photographs with professional detachment. Each image had been taken from angles that supported a predetermined narrative. The timestamps showed they'd been captured over several days, suggesting systematic surveillance. "Are you attempting to justify this morning's assault through character assassination?" Maya's question was direct enough to cut through Carter's diplomatic language. I'm trying to understand why a promising employee would suddenly become disruptive. Carter closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. Help me understand, Maya. What changed between your first week and your 6th week? The question was a trap, designed to force her into admitting the payroll investigation. Maya recognized the technique from her previous encounters with corporate management. Create a false choice between accepting blame or revealing the true source of conflict. What changed, Maya said carefully, is that I started paying attention to patterns that suggested systematic financial irregularities affecting minority employees. Carter's expression remained neutral, but his hands moved to the folder's edge. That's a very specific accusation. Do you have evidence to support it? I have evidence of multiple discrepancies between reported hours and actual payments. I have documentation of tip distributions that don't match sales records. I have payroll adjustments that disproportionately affect employees of color. And you've shared these concerns through proper channels? I've been attempting to address them through proper channels. This morning's meeting was apparently designed to discourage further investigation. Carter stood and moved to the windows, his silhouette dark against the late afternoon light reflecting off Lake Michigan. Maya, I'm going to be direct with you. The restaurant industry operates on extremely thin profit margins. Every position, every expense, every policy decision is carefully calculated to maintain viability. He turned back toward her, his expression shifting from diplomatic to something harder. When employees begin questioning operational decisions, making accusations about financial impropriety, threatening the stability we've worked years to achieve, that becomes a problem that requires immediate resolution. Maya felt the conversation's true purpose crystallizing. This wasn't about grooming standards or professional behavior. This was about silencing her investigation before it expanded beyond her individual concerns. Are you offering me a resolution, or threatening me with consequences? Carter returned to his desk and withdrew a second folder, this one significantly thicker than the first. I'm offering you a choice. We can resolve this morning's misunderstanding through a mutual agreement that protects everyone's interests. A generous severance package, positive references, a smooth transition that allows you to pursue opportunities that might be better suited to your investigative instincts. He opened the folder to reveal a legal document that had clearly been prepared in advance. Or we can proceed through formal channels, where your employment history, your interactions with colleagues, and your recent performance issues would be thoroughly documented and reviewed. Maya skimmed the document quickly. The severance offer was substantial, 6 months' salary plus benefits. The non-disclosure agreement was comprehensive, covering not just the morning's incident, but any observations about company operations, financial practices, or management decisions. The non-disparagement clause would prevent her from discussing Pinnacle publicly for 5 years. This was prepared before this morning's meeting, Maya observed. We believe in being thorough. You mean you've been planning to terminate my employment since I started asking questions about payroll discrepancies? Carter's smile was thin but acknowledging. We've been planning for multiple contingencies. This morning's incident simply accelerated our timeline. Maya closed the folder and placed it on the desk between them. I'll need time to review this with legal counsel. Of course. Take the evening. We'll need your decision by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Maya stood to leave, but Carter's voice stopped her at the door. Maya, I want you to understand something. Pinnacle Restaurant Group employs over 4,000 people across 12 states. We've built this company through careful attention to operational efficiency and strategic risk management. Individual employees who threaten that stability, they don't typically find the industry welcoming to their future career aspirations. The threat was delivered with corporate polish, but its meaning was unmistakable. Maya nodded once and left the office, her mind already working through the implications of what she'd just learned. The elevator descent felt like falling through layers of corporate bureaucracy, each floor marking another level of institutional protection for systematic abuse. By the time Maya reached the parking garage, she understood that her investigation had uncovered something much larger than payroll irregularities. She was fighting a machine designed to eliminate threats through financial incentives, legal intimidation, and professional isolation. But machines had weaknesses, and Maya had already begun documenting every moving part. Maya's apartment occupied the 8th floor of a converted warehouse in Pilsen, its industrial windows providing views of the Chicago skyline that shimmered with evening light. The space reflected her practical approach to life: functional furniture, minimal decoration, and a home office equipped with technology that supported her accounting background. She spread the day's evidence across her dining table like pieces of a complex puzzle. The audio recording from the conference room meeting, screenshots of the threatening text messages, photographs of her severed hair, copies of the payroll discrepancies she'd discovered, Carter's severance offer with its comprehensive non-disclosure provisions. Individually, each piece might be explained away through corporate legal maneuvering. Together, they painted a picture of systematic harassment designed to silence legitimate workplace concerns. Maya began organizing the materials chronologically, building a timeline that would be difficult for opposing counsel to dispute. Her laptop chimed with an email response from Patricia Wells's law firm. The attorney could meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. for an initial consultation. Maya confirmed the appointment and began preparing a comprehensive case summary that would allow Wells to assess the situation quickly. As she worked, Maya's phone buzzed with text messages from unknown numbers. "Reconsider the offer. It's generous. Think about your future in this industry. Mistakes have consequences." Maya screenshot each message and added them to her evidence file. The coordination was obvious. These weren't random threats, but part of a calculated campaign to pressure her into accepting the severance agreement. She drafted emails to 3 investigative journalists who'd covered corporate misconduct stories, outlining the basics of her situation and offering to provide documentation for potential news coverage. If Pinnacle wanted to escalate the conflict beyond internal resolution, Maya would demonstrate exactly how public corporate accountability could become. Her research into David Carter revealed a pattern she hadn't expected. Over the past 5 years, 7 employees had filed discrimination complaints against Pinnacle locations in Carter's region. 6 had been settled quickly with non-disclosure agreements. The 7th had resulted in a wrongful termination lawsuit that was still pending in federal court. Maya found the court filings online and discovered a familiar pattern: financial discrepancies, targeted harassment, forced resignations through hostile work environments. The plaintiff's attorney was Patricia Wells, the same lawyer Maya would be meeting tomorrow. She called Wells's office and left a message identifying herself as the Pinnacle employee requesting tomorrow's consultation. She mentioned Carter's name specifically and suggested reviewing the pending litigation for relevant patterns. By 9 p.m., Maya had created a comprehensive evidence package that documented not just the day's events, but the larger context of systematic employee harassment. She uploaded everything to secure cloud storage and emailed copies to her personal attorney and her sister in Seattle. Her phone rang as she was preparing for bed. The caller ID showed David Carter's mobile number. "Maya," his voice carried none of the afternoon's corporate polish. "I wanted to follow up on our conversation. All future communications should go through my attorney. Listen to me carefully. The offer on the table is generous, but it's not permanent. If you reject it, the next conversation will be significantly less friendly." Maya activated her phone's recording function. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Carter?" I'm explaining reality. This industry is smaller than you think. Word travels quickly about employees who make trouble for their employers. You have a choice. Take the money and move on, or find yourself unemployable in restaurant management. I understand completely. Good. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be. The line went dead. Maya saved the recording and added it to her evidence file. Carter's threats were becoming increasingly direct, creating additional documentation of the hostile environment Pinnacle had created. She set her alarm for 6 a.m. and tried to sleep, but her mind continued processing the day's events. Tomorrow would bring the legal consultation that might determine whether her case was strong enough to survive corporate counterattack. But tonight, Maya allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she was attempting. She was challenging a machine that had operated unchecked for years, protected by legal resources and industry connections that could destroy her career with systematic precision. The smart play would be to take Carter's money and disappear into another job in another city. But Maya had learned something important during the conference room assault. They were so confident in their power that they'd documented their own crimes. The evidence they'd created in their arrogance might be exactly what she needed to dismantle the system they'd built. The morning's snowfall had transformed downtown Chicago into a postcard illustration of urban winter. Maya walked the 6 blocks to Patricia Wells's office through streets that muffled sound and softened the sharp edges of the business district. The weather matched her mood, cold, clear, and potentially dangerous for anyone unprepared for the conditions. Wells's firm occupied 3 floors of a renovated brownstone in the Loop, its brick facade and brass nameplate suggesting established success without corporate ostentation. Maya arrived 15 minutes early and used the time to review her evidence summary one final time. Patricia Wells was younger than Maya had expected, perhaps 42, with prematurely gray hair and intense brown eyes that suggested laser focus. Her office walls displayed law degrees from Northwestern and Harvard, along with framed newspaper articles documenting successful employment cases against major corporations. "Tell me about yesterday," Wells said without preamble, gesturing for Maya to sit in one of the leather chairs facing her desk. Maya began with the conference room meeting, providing a precise chronological account of the assault while Wells took notes on a legal pad. She presented the audio recording, the photographs, the threatening text messages, and the timeline connecting her payroll investigation to the escalating harassment. Wells listened without interruption, her expression remaining neutral, until Maya described Carter's ultimatum and the threatening phone call. "Play that recording again," Wells said. Maya replayed Carter's threats while Wells transcribed key phrases verbatim. When it finished, Wells leaned back in her chair and was quiet for several moments. "How many employees would you estimate have access to the payroll systems you've been investigating?" "Regional management, HR, and senior supervisors, maybe 20 people across the 12 locations. And the discrepancies you've documented, what's the estimated financial impact?" Maya had prepared for this question. "Based on 6 weeks of analysis across 3 locations, I estimate between $15,000 and $20,000 monthly in wage theft. Extrapolated across all locations and the 5-year period I've researched, we're looking at potentially over $1 million. Wells made additional notes. "The pattern you've described, targeted harassment following employee investigations. It's consistent with what we're seeing in the Jefferson case. The pending litigation against Pinnacle? Rachel Jefferson, former assistant manager in Milwaukee. Similar payroll irregularities, similar escalation pattern, similar severance offer with comprehensive NDAs." Wells opened a file drawer and withdrew a thick folder. "The difference is, that Rachel didn't have the evidence you've gathered. Maya felt something shift in her chest, not relief, but recognition that her instincts had been correct. What kind of evidence? Rachel documented the financial discrepancies, but she didn't record the confrontations. She didn't capture the threats on audio. She didn't photograph the evidence of harassment. Wells gestured toward Maya's evidence package. You've documented a pattern of criminal behavior with admissible evidence. Criminal? Wage theft is a crime in Illinois. Assault is a crime. Witness intimidation is a crime. What you've described isn't just civil discrimination. It's a criminal conspiracy involving multiple defendants. Maya had prepared for a civil lawsuit, but criminal implications changed the landscape entirely. What does that mean practically? It means we have leverage they weren't expecting. It means the U.S. Attorney's Office might be interested in reviewing your evidence. It means Pinnacle's legal strategy of settlement and silence might not be available this time. Wells opened her laptop and began typing rapidly. I need to ask you a difficult question, Maya. Are you prepared for this to become public? Criminal investigations don't allow for non-disclosure agreements. Media coverage is likely. Your name and face will be associated with this case for years. Maya just discovered that her evidence doesn't just prove workplace harassment. It documents federal crimes that could send her attackers to prison. But fighting a criminal case means giving up any chance of quiet resolution, any possibility of taking the money and disappearing. If you were sitting in Maya's position right now, knowing that speaking up could destroy her career, but staying silent enables the abuse of hundreds of other workers, what would you choose? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because Maya's next decision determines whether this stays a personal battle or becomes a movement for workplace justice. Maya stared out the windows of Wells's office, watching pedestrians navigate the snowy sidewalks below. Each person carried their own struggles, their own workplace frustrations, their own calculations about when to fight and when to accept injustice as the price of employment. How many other employees are affected by this? Maya asked. Wells consulted her files. Based on Rachel Jefferson's case and your evidence, we estimate between 60 and 80 current employees across the 12 locations, potentially hundreds more over the 5-year period we can document. And if I take Carter's severance offer? The pattern continues. The system remains intact. The next employee who asks inconvenient questions faces the same choice you're facing now. Maya understood the weight of the decision. Accepting the settlement would provide financial security and professional protection, but it would also guarantee that other workers would face the same harassment, the same impossible choices, the same systematic exploitation. What's our probability of success if we proceed? Wells pulled out a legal pad and began sketching a rough timeline. Criminal referral to the U.S. Attorney. 90% chance they'll open an investigation based on your evidence. Civil lawsuit. 80% chance of significant settlement or trial victory. Media coverage. 100% chance of national attention. She paused, her pen hovering over the pad. Personal cost to you. Career disruption. Public scrutiny. Potential retaliation attempts. But Maya, I've been practicing employment law for 18 years. I've never seen evidence this comprehensive documenting systematic wage theft and harassment. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Deadline approaching. Don't make a mistake you'll regret. She showed the message to Wells, who immediately photographed it with her phone. They're monitoring your communications, Wells observed. That's additional evidence of witness intimidation. Maya felt the last pieces of her decision clicking into place. The threats weren't just directed at her. They were part of a system designed to silence anyone who challenged corporate abuse of power. Accepting the settlement would validate their methods and encourage their expansion. If we proceed with criminal referrals, what's the timeline? Federal investigations move slowly but thoroughly, 6 months to 2 years for resolution. The civil case could proceed parallel to the criminal investigation. Wells leaned forward in her chair. But Maya, once we trigger the criminal process, there's no backing out. No settlement discussions, no quiet resolution. You become a federal witness in a case against a corporation with significant legal resources. Maya thought about her grandmother's hands weaving her hair into protective braids, about the cultural significance of what Blake Miller had cut away with kitchen shears, about the other employees who'd faced similar attacks without documentation, without support, without the privilege of having resources to fight back. I want to proceed with both criminal and civil action. Wells nodded slowly. Then, let's start building a case that dismantles this system completely. She pulled out a fresh legal pad and began outlining the investigative strategy. First, we document everything they've done in the past 24 hours. Every threat, every communication, every attempt at intimidation. Second, we reach out to other affected employees and offer them protection under whistleblower statutes. Third, we prepare a comprehensive criminal referral that connects your evidence to the broader pattern Rachel Jefferson identified. Maya's phone rang. David Carter's number appeared on the screen. "Don't answer," Wells advised. "Let it go to voicemail, then we'll document whatever message he leaves." The call went to voicemail. 2 minutes later, Maya's phone chimed with a voice message notification. Wells gestured toward the phone. "Let's hear what he has to say." Maya activated the speaker function and played Carter's message. "Maya, it's David. I hope you're considering our conversation carefully. The offer we discussed expires at 9 a.m., which is—" He paused, presumably checking the time, "in 47 minutes. After that, we'll be pursuing alternative strategies to address your employment status. I strongly encourage you to make the smart choice here." Wells transcribed the message verbatim, noting the timestamp and the implied threat. Alternative strategies to address your employment status. That's textbook witness intimidation. Maya felt a strange calm settling over her decision. The system had revealed itself completely. The coordination, the documentation, the arrogance of believing legal threats could silence legitimate grievances. What do we do first? Wells opened her laptop and began typing. "We draft a letter to the U.S. Attorney's Office requesting investigation of federal crimes related to wage theft and witness intimidation. We file a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission documenting the discrimination and harassment. And we prepare a civil lawsuit that seeks damages not just for you, but for every affected employee." She paused her typing and looked directly at Maya. "Are you certain about this? Once I send these documents, David Carter and Pinnacle Restaurant Group will know they're facing federal investigation. Their response will be swift and aggressive." Maya thought about Blake Miller's satisfied expression as he cut her hair, about Sarah Collins's cold smile, about Derek Stone's nervous documentation of what they'd believed was her humiliation, about Carter's confident threats and systematic intimidation. "I'm certain." Wells resumed typing. "Then let's show them what happens when they attack someone who's prepared to fight back." At exactly 9 a.m., Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from David Carter. "Your employment with Pinnacle Restaurant Group is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building to collect personal items." Maya screenshot the message and forwarded it to Wells, who replied within minutes. "Perfect timing. Termination immediately after declining to sign NDA constitutes retaliation, added to criminal referral. Maya drove downtown through the morning snow, not to negotiate or submit to corporate pressure, but to collect her personal belongings as evidence of how quickly the system moved to punish resistance. The security escort would be documented. The timing would be preserved. Every action Pinnacle took to intimidate her was actually strengthening the case against them. The Pinnacle building looked the same as always, its glass facade reflecting the cloudy sky without revealing the criminal activity being conducted inside. Maya parked in the visitor section and walked through the marble lobby with her shoulders straight and her documentation complete. Blake Miller waited by the elevator bank, his chef's jacket replaced by a security uniform that didn't quite fit his kitchen manager's physique. His smile was sharp with anticipated satisfaction. "Maya, ready for your exit interview?" She activated her phone's recording app and spoke clearly for the microphone. "I'm here to collect personal items from my office under escort, as demanded by David Carter, following my refusal to sign a non-disclosure agreement covering criminal activity." Blake's smile faltered slightly. "Let's just keep this simple." The elevator ride to the 24th floor was silent except for the mechanical sounds of ascent. Maya used the time to study Blake's reflection in the polished steel doors, noting the nervous energy that suggested he understood the gravity of what they'd set in motion. Her office had been searched. Desk drawers pulled open, file cabinets emptied, computer removed. The systematic violation of her workspace was documented by the security cameras that Blake seemed to have forgotten were recording his presence. "Thorough," Maya observed, photographing the ransacked office. "Just collecting company property," Blake replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Maya gathered her personal items: a framed photograph of her grandmother, a coffee mug from her previous job, the small succulent plant she'd bought to brighten the windowsill. Everything else belonged to Pinnacle, including the evidence of financial irregularities that had triggered this entire confrontation. But Maya had prepared for this moment. Copies of everything relevant were already in Patricia Wells's possession, uploaded to secure cloud storage, and backed up in multiple locations. The office search had yielded nothing that would compromise the investigation. "That's everything," Maya said, placing her personal items in a small box. Blake escorted her back to the elevator, through the lobby, and out to the parking garage. At her car, he made one final attempt at corporate damage control. "Maya, look, yesterday got out of hand. Nobody wanted things to escalate this far. If you're smart about this, there might still be room for negotiation." Maya placed her box in the car and turned to face him directly. "Blake, yesterday you used kitchen shears to cut my hair while your colleagues recorded it for documentation. Today, you escorted me from the building after David Carter terminated my employment for refusing to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Tomorrow, you'll be explaining those actions to federal investigators." She opened her car door, then paused. The smart thing would have been treating employees with basic dignity. But you've made different choices, and now you'll live with the consequences. Maya drove away from Pinnacle Restaurant Group for the last time, her rearview mirror showing Blake Miller standing in the parking garage with the expression of someone who'd finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. Patricia Wells's office had been transformed into a war room during Maya's absence. Legal documents covered every available surface. Timelines were posted on whiteboards, and evidence was organized in color-coded file folders that suggested systematic preparation for extended litigation. "How did the termination go?" Wells asked as Maya entered. "Exactly as we predicted. Immediate retaliation, office searched, escort by the same person who assaulted me yesterday. All documented." Wells added the new information to her comprehensive timeline. "Perfect. Textbook retaliation that strengthens every aspect of our case." She gestured toward the organized evidence. "While you were collecting your belongings, I've been building our criminal referral. The U.S. Attorney's Office has agreed to review the case this afternoon." Maya studied the documents spread across Wells's conference table. Financial charts showing the scope of wage theft. Timeline graphics connecting her investigation to the escalating harassment. Transcripts of recorded threats and intimidation attempts. What's next? This afternoon, we present everything to federal prosecutors. Tomorrow, we file civil suits on behalf of you and potentially dozens of other affected employees. Next week, we begin depositions that will require David Carter and his co-conspirators to testify under oath. Wells opened her laptop and pulled up a news article. And this morning, investigative journalist Michael Torres published the first story about Pinnacle's systematic harassment of employees who report financial irregularities. Maya read the headline, "Restaurant Chain Accused of Attacking Employee Who Uncovered Wage Theft." The article included her audio recording of the conference room assault, photographs of her severed hair, and analysis connecting her case to broader patterns of corporate retaliation against whistleblowers. "It's already being shared on social media," Wells continued. "Labor advocacy groups are amplifying the story. Other Pinnacle employees are reaching out with their own experiences." Maya's phone was buzzing constantly with notifications, messages of support from strangers, interview requests from additional journalists, and contact information from employees at other Pinnacle locations who'd experienced similar harassment. But there were also threatening messages from unknown numbers. "You've made a mistake you'll regret. Think about your family's safety. This won't end well for you." Wells documented each threat, while Maya forwarded them to the federal prosecutors reviewing her case. "They're panicking," Wells observed. "These threats are evidence of ongoing criminal behavior." Maya felt the strange calm that came with having crossed the point of no return. Yesterday, she'd been a restaurant supervisor who'd uncovered financial irregularities. Today, she was the central witness in a federal investigation of corporate crimes that affected hundreds of workers. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Wells asked. Maya looked at the evidence covering the conference table, at the timeline documenting systematic abuse, at the photographs of her hair that Blake Miller had cut with kitchen shears while his colleagues recorded the assault. "I've been ready since they decided my dignity was negotiable." Wells smiled with the satisfaction of an attorney who'd found the perfect client for an important case. "Then let's go show federal prosecutors exactly how much evidence we've gathered against Pinnacle Restaurant Group." The federal building downtown rose 30 floors above the Chicago River, its limestone facade and neoclassical columns suggesting the weight of institutional authority. Maya and Patricia Wells passed through security screening that treated them like any other citizens seeking justice through official channels. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Morgan occupied a corner office on the 14th floor, her windows providing views of the city where corporate crimes were prosecuted when evidence was sufficient to support federal charges. At 38, Morgan had built her reputation on complex white-collar cases that required months of investigation and careful legal strategy. "Ms. Washington," Morgan said, gesturing toward chairs facing her desk, "I've reviewed the preliminary materials your attorney provided. The evidence is comprehensive." Maya placed her evidence portfolio on Morgan's desk. "It documents criminal behavior by multiple defendants over several years." Morgan opened the portfolio and began examining the contents methodically. The audio recording from the conference room assault, the threatening text messages and phone calls, the financial documentation showing systematic wage theft, the timeline connecting Maya's investigation to escalating retaliation. Walk me through the payroll discrepancies, Morgan said, studying Maya's spreadsheets. Maya explained her analysis. Overtime hours that disappeared from timesheets, tip distributions that didn't match reported sales, wage adjustments that disproportionately affected minority employees. The pattern was consistent across multiple locations and affected dozens of workers. What's the estimated financial impact? Over $1 million in stolen wages across the 5-year period I've documented. Potentially more if the pattern extends to locations I haven't analyzed. Morgan made notes while reviewing the evidence. The assault and harassment are prosecutable under federal civil rights statutes. The wage theft violates multiple federal labor laws. The witness intimidation constitutes obstruction of justice. She looked up from the documents. Ms. Washington, are you prepared to serve as a witness in a potentially lengthy federal investigation? This could take 2 years to resolve, and Pinnacle will attempt to discredit your testimony through every legal means available. Maya had anticipated this question. I'm prepared to testify to everything I've documented. The evidence speaks for itself. Morgan turned to Wells. What's your client's ultimate objective here? Justice for the affected workers, accountability for the perpetrators, systematic changes that prevent this from happening to other employees. And personally, Maya answered directly. I want David Carter and his co-conspirators to face consequences for their crimes. I want the stolen wages returned to the workers they've exploited. I want this system dismantled so thoroughly that no other employee faces what I've faced. Morgan closed the evidence portfolio and leaned back in her chair. Ms. Washington, based on the evidence you've provided, my office will open a formal investigation into Pinnacle Restaurant Group. We'll be issuing subpoenas for financial records, surveillance footage, and employee communications. We'll be conducting interviews with current and former employees across all 12 locations. Maya felt something shift in her chest. Not relief, but recognition that the federal justice system was taking her evidence seriously. What does that mean practically? Wells asked. It means Pinnacle is now under federal investigation for wage theft, civil rights violations, and witness intimidation. It means David Carter and his associates will be interviewed by FBI agents. It means this case will proceed regardless of any settlement discussions or corporate pressure tactics. Morgan opened her laptop and began typing. Ms. Washington, I want you to understand something. Federal investigations are thorough but slow. Pinnacle will hire expensive attorneys who will challenge every piece of evidence, question every witness, and attempt to minimize the scope of criminal liability. You'll be subjected to intensive scrutiny, and your personal and professional history will be examined in detail. Maya nodded. I understand. But, Morgan continued, you've provided the most comprehensive documentation of systematic corporate crime that I've seen in 5 years of federal prosecution. If the evidence supports federal charges, this case could result in significant prison sentences and financial penalties. Wells leaned forward. What's the timeline for the investigation? 6 to 18 months for the criminal investigation. Indictments, if supported by evidence, within 2 years. Trial, if defendants don't plead guilty, within 3 years. Maya absorbed the timeline. 3 years of legal proceedings, media attention, and corporate attempts at retaliation. But also 3 years of federal protection, systematic investigation, and potential justice for hundreds of affected workers. I'm ready to proceed, Maya said. Morgan smiled with the satisfaction of a prosecutor who'd found a strong case. Then let's begin dismantling the system that David Carter and Pinnacle Restaurant Group have built on the exploitation of their workers. The afternoon snowfall had intensified by the time Maya and Wells left the federal building. Downtown Chicago was wrapped in white that softened the harsh edges of the business district, creating an atmosphere of temporary beauty over the permanent structures of power and commerce. Maya's phone had been buzzing constantly during the federal meeting. Messages of support from labor advocacy groups, interview requests from national media outlets, and contact information from Pinnacle employees across multiple states who'd experienced similar harassment. But the threatening messages had also intensified. Federal protection won't last forever. You've destroyed people's lives over nothing. This isn't over. Wells documented each threat, while Maya forwarded them to Assistant U.S. Attorney Morgan. The intimidation is escalating, Wells observed. That's evidence of ongoing criminal behavior. They walked the 6 blocks to Wells's office, through streets that seemed simultaneously ordinary and transformed. Yesterday, Maya had been an isolated restaurant supervisor fighting corporate abuse alone. Today, she was the central witness in a federal investigation that could send multiple defendants to prison. "How do you feel?" Wells asked as they reached her building. Maya considered the question carefully. "Like I've crossed a line I can't uncross. Like I've started something that's bigger than my individual situation." "That's exactly what you've done." Wells's office had continued evolving into a litigation command center. Additional staff were organizing evidence, preparing subpoena requests, and coordinating with federal investigators. The scope of the case was expanding beyond Maya's individual complaint into a comprehensive investigation of systematic corporate abuse. "Update from the newsroom," announced James Carter, Wells's investigative paralegal. No relation to the Pinnacle executive, he specialized in corporate document analysis and media coordination. Michael Torres's story has been picked up by national outlets. Labor Secretary's office has issued a statement about wage theft in the restaurant industry. Pinnacle's stock price dropped 8% in afternoon trading. Maya studied the financial charts showing Pinnacle's declining market value. "They're losing money." "They're losing credibility," Wells corrected, "which is more valuable than money in corporate America." Maya's laptop chimed with an email from David Carter. The subject line read, "Final opportunity." Wells gestured for Maya to open the message while she activated her recording software. Carter's email was longer than his previous communications. "Maya, the situation has escalated beyond what anyone intended. Legal proceedings will be expensive and damaging for everyone involved. I'm authorized to offer a final settlement that addresses your concerns while protecting the interests of all parties. The terms would be substantially more generous than our previous discussions. Please contact me directly to arrange a meeting." Wells finished reading and immediately began typing a response. "All communication should be directed through legal counsel. Ms. Washington is represented by attorney and will not be engaging in direct negotiations." "He's panicking," Wells observed. "Federal investigation, media coverage, stock price decline. The pressure is working." Maya felt the strange satisfaction of watching a system that had seemed invulnerable begin to crack under the weight of its own documented crimes. What happens next? Tomorrow morning, FBI agents execute search warrants at Pinnacle corporate headquarters and all 12 restaurant locations. They'll seize financial records, surveillance footage, computer files, and employee communications. Every email David Carter has sent, every payroll adjustment Blake Miller has made, every harassment incident Sarah Collins has participated in, it all becomes evidence in a federal case. Wells pulled up a calendar on her laptop. "Next week, we begin depositions of Pinnacle employees. We start with the lower-level participants and work our way up to David Carter. Each testimony will be given under oath, with penalties for perjury." Maya imagined Blake Miller, Derek Stone, Sarah Collins, and Jessica Hayes sitting in depositions, forced to testify about their coordination in assaulting her, their systematic harassment of other employees, their participation in wage theft schemes. Will they cooperate? Some will. Federal investigators are skilled at creating incentives for cooperation, offer reduced charges to employees who provide testimony against their supervisors, make it clear that the evidence is overwhelming and cooperation is the only path to leniency. Maya's phone rang. The caller ID showed Rachel Jefferson, the former Milwaukee assistant manager whose pending lawsuit had provided the template for Maya's case. "Rachel," Maya answered, activating the speaker function. "Maya, I saw the news coverage. I wanted to thank you for doing what I couldn't do, documenting everything." Rachel's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting corporate abuse without sufficient evidence. "My case has been stalled for months because I didn't have recordings, didn't have photographs, didn't have the comprehensive documentation you've gathered. How can we help each other? Patricia Wells is coordinating our cases. Your evidence strengthens my lawsuit, and my testimony supports the pattern you've documented. Together, we represent dozens of affected employees across multiple states." Wells gestured for the phone. "Rachel, this is Patricia. With Maya's evidence, I believe we can reopen settlement discussions in your case from a position of strength. Pinnacle can't settle with Maya through NDAs anymore. The criminal investigation prevents that. They'll want to resolve both cases before the scope expands further." Maya understood the strategic implications. Her refusal to accept Carter's severance offer had removed Pinnacle's ability to bury the evidence through confidential settlements. The criminal investigation meant that everything would become public record, creating pressure for systematic resolution rather than individual silencing. "What's the best case outcome?" Rachel asked. Wells consulted her legal notes. Criminal convictions for the primary defendants. Financial penalties in the millions. Comprehensive changes to Pinnacle's employment practices. Public accountability that prevents this from happening at other companies. And, worst case, lengthy litigation, aggressive corporate defense, media campaigns to discredit our witnesses. But Maya's evidence is so comprehensive that even the worst-case scenario results in significant accountability. After ending the call with Rachel, Maya sat in Wells's office watching the snow continue to fall over downtown Chicago. Tomorrow would bring federal raids, media coverage, and the beginning of legal proceedings that could continue for years. But tonight, Maya allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she'd accomplished. 24 hours ago, she'd been an isolated employee facing impossible choices. Today, she'd triggered a federal investigation that could dismantle a system of corporate abuse affecting hundreds of workers. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her sister in Seattle. "Saw the news. I'm proud of you." Maya smiled as she typed her response. "Just getting started." The FBI raids began at 6 a.m. sharp across 12 states simultaneously. Maya watched the live news coverage from her apartment as federal agents executed search warrants at every Pinnacle Restaurant Group location, their coordinated operation unfolding with the precision of a military campaign. The Chicago headquarters raid was broadcast live on 3 local news stations. Agents in blue windbreakers emerged from the building, carrying boxes of financial records, computer hard drives, and surveillance equipment. The perp walk imagery was devastating for Pinnacle's corporate reputation. Federal law enforcement treating their headquarters like a crime scene. Maya's phone buzzed with updates from Patricia Wells. Milwaukee location. Agents seized 5 years of payroll records. Denver office. Computer servers confiscated. Phoenix restaurant. Surveillance footage secured going back 18 months. Each notification represented thousands of pieces of evidence that would either support or contradict the systematic abuse Maya had documented. The scope was staggering. Financial crimes affecting hundreds of workers, harassment patterns spanning multiple states, corporate conspiracy involving dozens of managers and executives. David Carter's arrest warrant was executed at his Winnetka mansion at 7:15 a.m. Local news cameras captured federal agents leading him from his front door in handcuffs, his silver hair disheveled, his corporate authority reduced to criminal defendant status. The images went viral within hours. Blake Miller, Derek Stone, Sarah Collins, and Jessica Hayes were arrested at their respective homes between 7:30 and 8 a.m. Each arrest was documented by news crews who'd been tipped off by law enforcement sources. The coordination sent a clear message. This wasn't individual misconduct, but organized criminal activity. Maya watched the coverage with a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief. 24 hours ago, these people had controlled her employment, her financial security, her professional future. Today, they were facing federal charges that could result in decades in prison. Her doorbell rang at 8:45 a.m. Through the peephole, Maya saw a woman in her 50s with graying hair and a FBI credentials folder. Ms. Washington? Special Agent Rebecca Martinez, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'd like to discuss your cooperation in the ongoing investigation. Maya opened the door, noting the professional demeanor that suggested serious federal resources were now focused on her case. Agent Martinez entered and placed a thick folder on Maya's dining table. Ms. Washington, based on the evidence you've provided and the materials seized during this morning's raids, the Bureau is prepared to offer you comprehensive witness protection services during the investigation and trial phases. Maya studied the folder's contents: safe house accommodations, identity protection services, financial support during legal proceedings, and 24-hour security monitoring. Is this necessary? Agent Martinez's expression was grave. David Carter and his associates have significant financial resources and demonstrated willingness to intimidate witnesses. We've intercepted communications suggesting they're considering more aggressive retaliation tactics. Maya felt the weight of crossing from civil lawsuit into federal criminal territory. Witness protection meant acknowledging that powerful people wanted to silence her permanently. What kind of communications? References to permanent solutions and making examples. Nothing specific enough for additional charges yet, but sufficient to justify protective measures. Maya declined the safe house, but accepted 24-hour surveillance and emergency contact protocols. She wanted to maintain her normal life while the legal process unfolded, but understood that normal no longer included personal safety guarantees. Agent Martinez gathered her materials and prepared to leave. Ms. Washington, I want you to understand something. Federal investigations of this scope often take unexpected turns. Additional crimes may be discovered, more defendants may be charged, and the media attention will intensify significantly. Maya nodded. I'm prepared for whatever comes next. Good, because what comes next is going to test that preparation. Agent Martinez's warning proved prophetic within hours. By noon, Pinnacle's crisis management team had launched a coordinated media campaign designed to discredit Maya's testimony and minimize the federal investigation's significance. The first attack came through conservative news outlets that portrayed Maya as a disgruntled employee seeking financial gain through false accusations. The coverage emphasized her short tenure with Pinnacle, suggested her financial analysis was flawed, and questioned her motives for recording workplace conversations. The second wave targeted her personal background: childhood poverty, student loan debt, previous employment disputes. Corporate investigators had clearly spent the morning assembling a character assassination package designed to undermine her credibility as a federal witness. The third assault was more subtle, but potentially more damaging. Social media accounts spreading rumors about her mental health, her relationships, her fitness for supervisory responsibilities. The coordination was obvious, but difficult to prove, creating a cloud of manufactured controversy around her public image. Maya watched the attacks unfold, with the detached fascination of someone observing a system reveal its true nature. Corporate America's response to documented criminal activity was to destroy the person who'd documented it. Patricia Wells called at 2 p.m. with updates from the legal front. Pinnacle's attorneys have filed motions to suppress evidence, challenging the validity of search warrants and questioning the scope of federal jurisdiction. Standard corporate defense strategy: delay, deny, and discredit. How strong are their challenges? Weak on the law, but expensive to litigate. They're trying to drain federal resources and public attention through procedural warfare. Wells paused, her tone shifting to something more serious. Maya, there's something else. We've been contacted by employees from other restaurant chains reporting similar patterns of harassment and wage theft. This might be bigger than just Pinnacle. Maya absorbed the implications. Her individual case against workplace harassment was expanding into an investigation of industry-wide criminal activity. The scope was both empowering and overwhelming. How many other companies? 3 major chains, representing over 10,000 employees across 20 states. If the patterns match what we've documented at Pinnacle, we're looking at systematic wage theft in the millions and harassment affecting hundreds of workers. Maya's apartment suddenly felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in under the weight of becoming the central figure in a nationwide investigation of corporate crime. Her individual fight for dignity had become a test case for federal enforcement of labor laws. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Blood on your hands when people lose their jobs. Maya screenshot the message and forwarded it to Agent Martinez, adding it to the growing collection of threats that documented ongoing witness intimidation. Each threat was evidence of criminal behavior, but they were also personally exhausting reminders that powerful people wanted her silenced. The first major setback came 3 weeks into the federal investigation. Pinnacle's attorneys had successfully challenged the admissibility of some financial records, arguing that Maya's analysis exceeded her authorized access to payroll systems. The ruling didn't invalidate her core evidence, but it removed some supporting documentation that would have strengthened the wage theft charges. The second blow was personal. Maya's former colleagues at Pinnacle had been systematically contacted by corporate investigators and presented with a choice between cooperation and termination. Most chose employment security over truth-telling, leaving Maya isolated as the primary witness to events that multiple people had observed. The third setback was financial. Legal proceedings were expensive, media attention had made her unemployable in restaurant management, and unemployment benefits didn't cover the cost of being a federal witness in a high-profile case. Maya's savings were disappearing, while Pinnacle's corporate resources seemed unlimited. Patricia Wells attempted to provide reassurance during their weekly strategy meeting. Federal cases are marathons, not sprints. Pinnacle is spending millions on legal defense, but they're also facing mounting pressure from investors, regulators, and public opinion. Maya studied the financial projections Wells had prepared. Her legal costs would exceed $50,000 before the case reached trial. Even with Wells' reduced fees and federal witness support, the personal cost of seeking justice was becoming prohibitive. What if we can't afford to continue? Wells leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. Maya, I've been practicing employment law for 18 years. I've seen cases where corporate defendants successfully bankrupted plaintiffs through procedural delays and legal costs, but I've never seen evidence as comprehensive as what you've documented. She pulled out a folder containing correspondence from other attorneys. We've been contacted by the ACLU, the National Labor Relations Board, and 3 private law firms specializing in class action employment cases. They want to support this litigation because it could establish precedents that protect workers nationwide. Maya felt something shift in her understanding of the case's significance. Her individual complaint about harassment had become a test of whether federal law could protect workers from systematic corporate abuse. What does that mean practically? It means you're not fighting alone anymore. It means this case has resources and support beyond what any individual plaintiff could provide. It means Pinnacle is facing opponents with institutional staying power. Wells's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and gestured for Maya to listen. "This is the Attorney General's office." The conversation was brief but significant. The Department of Justice was elevating Maya's case to a federal task force investigating wage theft across the restaurant industry. Additional prosecutors, FBI resources, and legal support would be assigned to ensure comprehensive investigation. When Wells ended the call, Maya felt the weight of the moment. Her refusal to accept David Carter's severance offer had triggered a federal investigation that now involved the highest levels of law enforcement. "How do you feel about becoming the face of a national campaign against corporate wage theft?" Wells asked. Maya considered the question carefully. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a restaurant supervisor trying to understand payroll discrepancies. Today, she was the primary witness in a federal investigation that could reshape employment law. "Like I don't have a choice about backing down now." Wells smiled with the satisfaction of an attorney whose client understood the stakes. "Then, let's show them what happens when workers fight back with comprehensive evidence and federal support." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Tommy Brooks, the maintenance supervisor who'd been arrested during the initial FBI raids. Facing federal charges and potential decades in prison, Brooks contacted Patricia Wells through his attorney and offered to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentencing. Brooks' testimony revealed the full scope of Pinnacle's systematic crimes. Wage theft wasn't limited to individual locations, but was coordinated through corporate software that automatically adjusted payroll to reduce labor costs. The hair-cutting assault wasn't spontaneous harassment, but part of a documented strategy to eliminate employees who questioned financial irregularities. Most importantly, Brooks provided evidence that David Carter had implemented similar schemes at his previous employment with 2 other restaurant chains. The pattern of abuse extended back over a decade and affected thousands of workers across multiple companies. Maya listened to Brooks's deposition in Patricia Wells's conference room, taking notes as the maintenance supervisor described coordinated efforts to suppress employee complaints, manipulate financial records, and retaliate against workers who sought legal protection. The whole system was designed to steal money and intimidate anyone who noticed, Brooks testified under oath. David Carter didn't just run Pinnacle. He trained managers at other companies how to implement the same schemes. Wells paused the recording and turned to Maya. "This changes everything. We're not just prosecuting Pinnacle for individual crimes. We're exposing an industry-wide conspiracy involving multiple corporations and potentially thousands of victims." Maya absorbed the magnitude of what Brooks had revealed. Her documentation of harassment at a single restaurant location had uncovered a criminal network that spanned the hospitality industry. What happens next? Federal grand jury indictments against David Carter and 15 co-conspirators across 4 companies. Congressional hearings on wage theft in the restaurant industry. Civil lawsuits on behalf of over 2,000 affected workers. Wells pulled up news coverage on her laptop. And this morning, 3 additional restaurant chains announced they're conducting internal audits of their payroll practices. The pressure is working. Maya's phone buzzed with notifications from social media. Her story was trending nationally with hashtags like Justice for Maya and End Wage Theft. The individual assault she'd documented had become a symbol of systematic worker exploitation. But the attention also brought renewed threats. "You've destroyed an entire industry," read one message. "People's lives are ruined because of your lies," claimed another. Maya forwarded the threats to Agent Martinez, while Wells documented them as evidence of ongoing witness intimidation. Each message reinforced the federal case, while also demonstrating the personal cost of challenging corporate power. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Wells asked. "Congressional testimony, national media interviews, becoming the public face of labor law enforcement?" Maya thought about Blake Miller's satisfied expression as he cut her hair with kitchen shears, about David Carter's threats and systematic intimidation, about the hundreds of workers whose wages had been stolen while corporate executives collected bonuses for operational efficiency. Everything Maya's been building toward is about to explode across the national stage. The evidence is overwhelming. Congress wants her testimony, and the Department of Justice is treating this as a landmark case that could reshape worker protection laws. But you know corporate America doesn't surrender without deploying every dirty trick in their arsenal. Will Maya's strategy survive coordinated attacks from multiple billion-dollar companies, or will the system find a way to protect itself? The next 10 minutes will determine whether this becomes the story that finally holds corporate criminals accountable. Maya's congressional testimony was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November, 6 months after Blake Miller had cut her hair in Conference Room B. The Hart Senate Office Building's hearing room could accommodate 300 spectators, and every seat was occupied by labor advocates, corporate representatives, and media covering what had become the year's most significant employment law case. Senator Elizabeth Warren chaired the hearing on wage theft and worker protection in the restaurant industry. The panel included Republicans who'd initially opposed the investigation and Democrats who'd demanded comprehensive reform of labor law enforcement. Maya sat at the witness table in a navy blue suit, her hair grown back to shoulder length, her grandmother's silver bracelet visible on her wrist as she adjusted the microphone. To her right sat Tommy Brooks, the maintenance supervisor whose cooperation had exposed the industry-wide conspiracy. To her left was Rachel Jefferson, whose Milwaukee case had provided the template for federal prosecution. Behind them, in the first row of spectator seating, Patricia Wells and Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Morgan represented the legal team that had built the comprehensive case against Pinnacle and its co-conspirators. Senator Warren opened the hearing with a statement that framed Maya's individual experience within the broader context of systematic worker exploitation. "Ms. Washington, your courage in documenting and reporting criminal behavior has exposed wage theft affecting over 2,000 workers and corporate conspiracy spanning multiple states. Your testimony today will help Congress understand how federal law can better protect workers from retaliation and abuse." Maya leaned toward the microphone, her voice steady and clear. "Thank you, Senator Warren. 6 months ago, I was a restaurant supervisor who discovered payroll irregularities that suggested wage theft. When I asked questions about those irregularities, I was subjected to harassment, assault, and systematic intimidation designed to force my silence." She gestured toward the evidence displays arranged around the hearing room. Enlarged photographs of her severed hair, timeline graphics showing the escalation of harassment, financial charts documenting the scope of wage theft. "What I learned through federal investigation is that my experience wasn't isolated misconduct. It was part of a coordinated system designed to steal wages from workers and eliminate employees who challenged those practices." Senator Ted Cruz, the ranking Republican member, interrupted with a question designed to undermine her credibility. "Ms. Washington, You were employed by Pinnacle for only 6 weeks before making these serious accusations. Isn't it possible that you misunderstood company policies or misinterpreted normal business practices? Maya had prepared for this challenge through months of depositions and legal strategy sessions. Senator Cruz, I documented every interaction, recorded conversations, and preserved evidence of harassment and financial irregularities. Federal investigation confirmed that over $1 million in wages were stolen from workers across multiple locations over a 5-year period. That's not misinterpretation, that's criminal conspiracy. Cruz pressed further. But isn't it true that you recorded conversations without consent and accessed financial records outside your authorized responsibilities? Senator, I used legal recording applications to document harassment, and I accessed payroll information within my supervisory responsibilities to investigate discrepancies affecting my staff. Federal prosecutors and FBI investigators have confirmed that all evidence was legally obtained. Senator Warren intervened. Mr. Cruz, Ms. Washington is here as a witness to criminal activity, not as a defendant. Perhaps we should focus on the systematic wage theft she exposed rather than questioning her methods for documenting crimes. The hearing continued for 3 hours, with Maya providing detailed testimony about the harassment she'd experienced, the evidence she'd documented, and the federal investigation that had resulted from her refusal to accept corporate silence. During her final statement, Maya looked directly at the cameras broadcasting the hearing live. Corporate executives like David Carter believed they could steal wages, assault workers, and intimidate witnesses without consequences. They were wrong. Federal law protects workers who report criminal activity, and I'm here today because I refuse to let their crimes go undocumented. She paused, gathering her thoughts for the words that would define her public legacy. My grandmother taught me that dignity isn't something that can be cut away with scissors. It lives in your willingness to stand up for what's right, even when powerful people try to silence you. Today's hearing represents accountability for systematic abuse, but it also sends a message to every worker facing harassment. Document everything, seek legal protection, and never accept silence as the price of employment. The hearing room erupted in applause that lasted nearly 2 minutes. Maya sat quietly at the witness table, understanding that her individual complaint had become a landmark case in federal employment law. The final resolution came 8 months later through a comprehensive settlement that addressed both criminal charges and civil litigation. David Carter pleaded guilty to federal charges of wage theft, witness intimidation, and conspiracy, receiving a sentence of 6 years in federal prison and restitution payments totaling $2.3 million. Blake Miller, Derek Stone, Sarah Collins, and Jessica Hayes received sentences ranging from 18 months to 3 years, with all 4 banned from management positions in the restaurant industry. Their assault on Maya in Conference Room B had been classified as a federal hate crime, adding significant penalties to their convictions. Pinnacle Restaurant Group was fined $15 million and required to implement third-party oversight of all employment practices for 5 years. The company agreed to hire an independent monitor who would ensure compliance with federal labor laws and investigate any future complaints of harassment or discrimination. Most significantly, Maya's case had triggered congressional legislation known as the Restaurant Worker Protection Act, which strengthened penalties for wage theft, expanded whistleblower protections, and required companies to implement anonymous reporting systems for workplace abuse. Maya used her portion of the settlement to establish the Workplace Justice Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provided legal support, documentation training and advocacy services for workers facing harassment and discrimination. The Foundation's first office occupied a converted warehouse space in Chicago's West Loop, 6 blocks from the Pinnacle building where her ordeal had begun. On the Foundation's opening day, Maya stood before an audience of labor advocates, employment attorneys, and workers who'd been inspired by her story to challenge their own workplace abuse. Her remarks were brief but powerful. Justice isn't a feeling, it's evidence that outweighs denial. When powerful people abuse workers, they're counting on silence, isolation, and fear to protect their crimes. But when workers document abuse, seek legal protection, and refuse to accept injustice as normal, the system can be changed. She gestured toward the Foundation's mission statement displayed on the wall behind her. Every worker deserves dignity, safety, and fair compensation. When those rights are violated, comprehensive evidence and federal law can provide protection that individual resistance cannot achieve alone. The Foundation's first case involved restaurant workers in Detroit who documented systematic harassment similar to what Maya had experienced. Their evidence included audio recordings, financial documentation, and witness testimony that followed the investigative template Maya had developed. Within 6 months, the Detroit case had resulted in federal charges against 3 restaurant executives and civil settlements totaling $800,000 for affected workers. The pattern Maya had established, comprehensive documentation leading to federal prosecution, was becoming a model for worker advocacy nationwide. 2 years after Blake Miller cut her hair with kitchen shears, Maya returned to the Pinnacle building in downtown Chicago for a meeting with the company's new management team. The corporate restructuring following David Carter's conviction had installed leadership committed to compliance with federal employment law. The 26th floor conference room where she'd been assaulted had been converted into a training center for employment law compliance. The room's windows still overlooked Michigan Avenue, but the atmosphere had been transformed from corporate intimidation to worker education. Maya met with Jennifer Harrison, Pinnacle's new regional director, to discuss the company's implementation of federal oversight requirements. Harrison was a labor attorney who'd been hired specifically to ensure compliance with the settlement terms and prevent future violations. "Ms. Washington," Harrison said as they reviewed compliance reports, "I want you to know that your case has fundamentally changed how this industry approaches worker relations. The federal oversight, the congressional legislation, the ongoing monitoring, it's created accountability that didn't exist before." Maya studied the documentation showing Pinnacle's improved employment practices, anonymous reporting systems, third-party payroll auditing, mandatory harassment training, and independent investigation protocols for worker complaints. What about other companies? The Industry Association has adopted your case as a training example. Corporate executives understand that the federal enforcement environment has changed permanently. The cost of violating worker rights now includes criminal prosecution, not just civil settlements. Harrison pulled out a folder containing correspondence from other restaurant chains. "We've been contacted by companies requesting consultation on compliance programs. Your documentation methods and legal strategy have become the standard for federal prosecution of employment crimes." Maya felt the satisfaction of seeing systematic change emerge from individual resistance. Her refusal to accept corporate intimidation had created precedents that protected workers she would never meet. As she prepared to leave the building, Maya paused in the lobby where she'd first entered as a Pinnacle employee 8 months earlier. The marble floors and corporate artwork remained unchanged, but the power dynamics had been fundamentally altered. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister in Seattle. "Saw the Foundation's latest case on the news. Another victory. Proud of you." Maya smiled as she typed her response. Just getting started. She walked out of the Pinnacle building into the Chicago afternoon, her heels clicking against the sidewalk with the same determination that had carried her through months of legal proceedings, media scrutiny, and corporate retaliation. Behind her, the building rose 32 floors into the sky, its glass facade reflecting the clouds without revealing the transformation that had occurred within. Ahead of her lay the continued work of building systems that protected workers from abuse and ensured that dignity remained non-negotiable in American workplaces. Maya's braids had grown back, but her crown had never really been cut. It had always been there, in her courage, her preparation, and her refusal to accept injustice as the price of employment. 6 months later, the Workplace Justice Foundation had expanded to 3 cities and provided legal support for over 200 workers facing harassment and discrimination. Maya's story had become a blueprint for resistance. Her evidence-gathering methods were taught in law schools, and her congressional testimony was quoted in federal employment cases nationwide. But perhaps most importantly, workers across the country understood that comprehensive documentation, federal legal protection, and systematic resistance could defeat corporate crimes that had previously seemed invulnerable. Maya's individual fight for dignity had become a movement for workplace justice. Her refusal to stay silent had given voice to thousands of workers who'd previously faced abuse alone. The system that David Carter had built to exploit workers and silence opposition had been dismantled through evidence, federal law, and the determination of someone who understood that justice isn't a feeling. It's a documented case that outweighs corporate denial. Maya Washington had turned her worst day into a movement that would protect workers for generations. Her crown had never been in her hair. It had always been in her courage to fight back. Maya turned her moment of greatest vulnerability into a movement that changed federal employment law forever. If this story of courage, evidence, and systematic justice moved you, share it with someone who needs to see that fighting back is possible. Subscribe for more stories of ordinary people creating extraordinary change. And remember, your voice matters. Your evidence matters. And your dignity is always non-negotiable. What started with kitchen shears in a conference room ended with federal legislation protecting millions of workers. Maya Washington proved that when you document everything, seek legal protection, and refuse to accept silence as the price of employment, even the most powerful systems can be changed. Justice isn't just a word. It's what happens when courage meets comprehensive evidence.
You are not alone. Someone wants to hear you. Share your story. Thank you for watching to the end. Please like and subscribe to Stereo.